Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 381. Dice Games!
Nathan is so stinking excited.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Go visit GameToppersLLC.com and look at all of the awesome gaming accessories that you can find there. Go check out the Moriarty, the Holmes, or the Watson, or there's a bunch of others. But that's about the extent of my Sherlock Holmes-ness.
You know, I saw on their Facebook page, one of the members of the Facebook page posted a picture of the dice corral for the dice tower. They had flipped it around and used the slots. I can't remember what game they were playing, but it was a game where you have secret information, so you have the player blind on there, and they had hooked it on there and put all their bits inside of it.
I saw that. I can't remember what the game was either. Convenient that they were able to slide that in there and roll their dice so that it was all in that corral.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Lots of accessories to enhance game night.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Logan Howard.
I'm Andy Holiday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
And I'm Dave Holiday.
Be sure and check out our website. Check out our blogs, our pictures, and Dave's smiling face. And eventually, someday, his words will be put down into blog form so that we may get a window into his mind.
MeepleNation.com. This week we are discussing games that require the use of dice as one of the main elements. We just got done playing Space Base again.
And Logan missed that. Logan was so excited about Space
I
Base.
played it.
He played it. He actually recommended playing Space Base because it was that or Dominion.
I was
The lesser of two evils, huh?
I was debating about going and calling Cheryl, seeing how her day was going, about washing my hair, offering to wash Andy's hair.
Whoa, if you'd offered to wash mine, I'd have taken you up on it.
We wouldn't have been able to play Dominion.
I would have rather played Dominion.
There was a lot of amazing good choices on the table. I full-heartedly suggested Space Base.
Player count issue. Do we have 7 players?
7 players.
We had 7 players for Space Base. The point we were going to play Dominion, we had 6, and then we had a 7th player join. So it was a good thing you chose Space Base, because we had a 7th player show up after we just barely got it set up. Space Base is one of those that you're watching the person that's rolling the dice and paying attention. Similar to Settlers. I can't remember who made that parallel.
Me.
Dave, you made the parallel to
me,
Settlers.
this is Settlers of Catan in space, basically.
Would
It's
be-
not, because there is a game that is that, of course, but
That would be Starfarers.
it's essentially Settlers of Catan. A different twist on it.
Just that mechanic, as far as
No.
like the production side of it. Yes, I can see that.
To start a discussion on dice rolling games. Full disclosure, Space Base has never been my favorite game. And then it was on Nathan's 10 for 10 last year, so we played it 42 times in a span of a week and a half, it felt like.
Really, it was only 10 times, but it was in a span of 6 weeks.
Felt especially pushed down my throat, so it has a little bit of a sour taste, but I do like it better than Machi Koro. It's literally just dice rolling. And so we're going to be talking about dice games, roll and move games, roll to attack, like Risk. Space Base is just roll and get resources. That's basically the entire game.
Wonderful game. The production of resources is similar to Settlers of Catan in that 2 6-sided dice that are being rolled, and the probability of rolling 7s and 6s and all of those are higher than rolling 12s. The difference here is that you can also choose to take the dice separately. Take a 4 and a 3 instead of getting a 7. I like that because it makes it so that 6 is actually the best number in this game. But Logan, how did you enjoy it? Your fresh return to the game after the hiatus of
At
At least 7 months.
yeah.
It was a close Space Base game. The only reason why I won was because Dave wasn't paying attention.
Oh, so you could cheat?
Dave, where he just alluded that 6 is the best thing on the game. They have a card, you win.
You did that?
No.
Dave.
I was about to pull off the
Oh,
event.
really?
I bought the card, and in one time around the table, I filled it up twice. I needed one more.
It's because he had another card on 6, if you fill up this card, you can send a charge anywhere.
Right.
So he was sending it up to the 12. Nobody was rolling a bunch of 12s with rolling the 6s. But by the time that he had that, I was pretty close to my victory points going all the way up. And I was able to get some victory point gaining cards on some really easy, cheap 1s and 3s or something.
And he hexed the dice, and so for at least 2 rounds, nobody rolled 6s.
Yeah, that was a close game. Close between you and I. I had 40 points by the end, and if you hadn't gotten to 40, I would have won that game before Dave, too. So it was really kind of a race between the three of us on who was going to win.
Not a close game at all for the rest. Nobody was paying attention, so like 2 or 3 people that had 0 points.
The week prior to that, when I was there on Andy's game night, we also played Space Base. Amara had 0 points, and I had a whopping 6 points. Doug ended up winning with 44 or 45 points. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up.
You have less rounds to buy things when you have more people in that game because you get more resources by the time your turn comes around. I went through and counted all my cards that I bought. I think I bought 8 cards throughout the entire game, so it wasn't a very well-developed board at all. That's what did it to win the game.
Good die rolls, right? I did it for the right ones and getting them on the right numbers. One game I have that I really enjoy is Role Player. They have Role Player Adventures coming out. It's on pre-order, and I'm really excited for that. So with Role Player, you have 6-sided dice. Everybody has a character sheet, and it's like a D&D character. You have all your attributes that you're essentially rolling. 3 slots for your D6s to go. You're given a class that you want to try to fit your attributes into certain values to get max points for. They've added expansions, just extra content, and I'm excited for Adventures because once you get your character built, you're actually going to be able to use that character and go on an adventure.
That's what I was actually just going to say. We need to play Role Player again, and the next time we play it, we need to basically have in mind, by the time you are done with this, our next D&D campaign, you're going to create this character.
That would be fun, too. I think that would be a ton of fun.
Just whatever you end up with in Role Player, you don't always want the highest stats. In fact, the last time we played it, there were several that I was trying to have low so that I could win this game. I think that would be very fun to develop our characters that way.
That would be great because that's probably the longest part of us playing something like D&D is you creating a character.
You specifically.
That's true. That would be the fastest character creation ever for Dave.
It would be. It'd be really interesting, too, because in Role Player there are lots of different classes. You would have to take that character and figure out the best use of classes and feats and everything to build that character.
Well, and there's
I think we should totally do that.
I think it'd be fun. There's a lot of races, too, that are not necessarily part of the Dungeons and Dragons universe that you'd have to figure out. But I agree, that would be fun.
Remember that, because I won't.
I'll try. Role Player is one that I've always enjoyed playing. Like Dave said, taking that to the next level with the new Adventures expansion coming out. I'm so excited for it.
So what about Chutes and Ladders?
I haven't played that game since my kids were 3.
That's one of the more basic dice games, where it's literally I just roll the die and I move my piece. In essence, that's just like a dice game. It's nothing like Liar's Dice or anything like that. It's just roll a dice and...
You're right. I've noticed a lot of these older games that used to have dice, they've been replaced with cards. Yeah. Sorry's a perfect example. They don't have dice in Sorry anymore.
Oh, really?
You just have a deck of cards and you flip the card. It tells you what you do on your turn.
I thought I was going to hate that idea. I mean, not like Sorry's my go-to anyway, but it's one that my wife and kids will play with. Oh, man, that's lame. I don't want to get rid of the dice, but it's not awful.
Honestly, getting rid of D6s, actually not a bad idea at all. Let's just replace all D6s in all games with cards. Because D6s hate my guts.
If we were going to edit that from this list, how many games would we have left over?
No, very, very few.
Very many, yeah. But you're talking about Chutes and Ladders. You roll the die, you're going to move, and you're going to resolve that action. There are some of those classic games that you're going to do that. Clue, you're going to roll those dice, and then you're going to make those movements. Go back to some of those classic games, too. Where's the roll and the attack? Like Risk. You move your armies and you're going to roll and resolve that battle. But games have improved on that. We look at the game that we're playing. We have 2 games left in our Star Wars Imperial Assault campaign where that's where you're going to move and then you're going to resolve that attack. And I like how games like Imperial Assault, Descent, some of them resolve a little bit different, like you do in Risk, where you're just rolling that D6.
It's not just comparing pips. It's now they've modified the D6, and so now you have hit symbol, you have the surges, you have a whole bunch of other things which go back to your player card. There's a lot of abilities that go back and forth with that, so it's not just roll and see who got higher.
And even games like Big Trouble in Little China, the game, you roll those dice and then you compare that to your character sheet and your character card to see how your character augments those rolls that are made. For me, that's a big improvement. This is a mechanic that's been around for a long time, but we look at those classic games and that augmentation to just rolling those dice, it's evolved, and like I said, it's in a wide variety of games now where it's not just roll and resolve, where it's roll, compare, add your stuff that you need to, and then resolve. In a lot of those games, your opponent has the option to roll in response, also make those manipulations to their dice as well.
The games that do better at this, they stick out better in my mind. It's been a while since we played Big Trouble in Little China. Want to play it again. Great game. Secrets of the Lost Station we've played since then. I don't have the greatest memory of that game, but I know that we've done it.
We played once pre-COVID because it was on my 10 for 10, and so that was one that I played on my own.
That goes back to my point, though. It's been longer time since I played Big Trouble, and as soon as you mentioned it, I'm like, holy smoke, that's a great game. I want to play it again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that game. I really enjoyed that game. It is really kind of frustrating sometimes that I know we complain about this maybe almost every episode, but there's just so many great games out there and not enough time to play all these. As we talk about them and we spawn these memories like, oh, that's a really good game. We should get back to that again.
I was just thinking today of Fury of Dracula. We need to start planning when we're going to play that the once a year. Well, I guess that's October's problem.
That's October's problem.
You know, you mentioned the Descent and Imperialist. Descent's my favorite game of all time. I think that's why I like dungeon crawl games. I like the aspect of being able to attack. Like you said, Nathan, both you and Logan said, I can roll something on my turn and someone else could roll the same attack on their turn, and they do completely different things. The customization or the variability, it just adds a little interesting factor to it, is really high for me. I love the fantasy aspect. I think that's one of the reasons why I like Descent more than Imperial Assault is I like the theme of fantasy more than I do space. I like the space theme, the Star Wars theme, but for some reason fantasy, it just does that for me.
I'm the exact opposite. I do enjoy fantasy games. Games like Lord of the Rings and Descent. But for me, Star Wars just shines so much more for me. I really like throwing dice. I mean, I'm not a every game must include dice kind of person, but when a game does include dice, I'm not mad.
So one game that comes to my mind, and I don't know if you guys have ever played this, I think Dave has, is the construction game. With the construction game, you're rolling dice and you're moving around the board like the old school Monopoly, type games. So you're moving your worker around the board, but the board, you're moving through the year. One time around the board is one whole year. Different weeks of every month on every space. So it's the second week of February, third week of February. Every space is a week throughout the month, and there's 52 spaces. Trying to get construction jobs. So you have the plot of land you own, which is in the center of the board, and you're buying equipment, construction equipment. And depending on where you land during the year, you are trying to take on certain construction jobs. On the bottom of each space, either you draw a card for operating expenses, or it'll just have what it's going to cost you to do that job. Sometimes you get a discount if you have a certain piece of equipment or whatever. Then you roll the die again and look at a separate card, and based on what you roll and how many tractors of that specific type you have for that job will determine how much money you make. It's based on the farming game. It's just a lot shorter than the farming game. The farming game is a very long game. The construction game, not so much. It goes by very quick. The premise is the same. And
So they've never witnessed construction before?
You're talking, you don't think jobs get done in a week?
Yeah. They don't get done in a year. They don't get it done on time.
as far as that goes, it is not realistic. You are absolutely right.
Because like farming, it's everything has to get done by the end of the season.
And as far as the farming game is concerned, that is fairly realistic. And some of the Farmer's Fate cards can be detrimental, which in farming, some of that stuff can absolutely happen. which the game was developed by a farmer. So it makes sense that it is a little more scenario-driven as far as real scenarios. But you're right, the construction game, yeah, not very realistic, but it is faster. That tends to get to the table a little more often than the farming game does, just for that reason alone.
Time limits on games does make a difference on replayability.
Yeah.
Or maybe not necessarily replayability, but frequency of playability.
Depends on who you're playing with. Some people just...
Dave's sitting right there.
A 3-hour game, if someone knows they're going to be sitting there playing one game for 3 hours, yeah, I'm out. I'm not even going to start the game. Whereas other people are perfectly okay sitting down and playing an 8-hour game.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Reminds me of a meme that I saw on the internet. Is 8 hours a long time? Well, it depends.
It sure does.
Work, yes, 8 hours forever. Board game, not so much. For me to voluntarily sit down for a 3-hour game, if I know I don't like the game, it's a much harder...
I think that's probably more to the point than anything. Because if it's a game that you're not a really big fan of, or a game that you're not even mildly interested in, if it's not a game that you are fully invested in, that 3-hour time limit can seem like 6 hours. It can feel like you're playing a game with Dave. Whereas if it's a game that you're really enjoying and it's a game that you really like, that 3 hours could be more like playing a game with Logan, where Logan's just like, boom, let's take a turn and move on. Somewhere in between, you get super fast Logan and...
Analog Dave.
I don't know if analog is even a word anymore. Was there a word slower than analog?
Pony Express?
Pen and paper?
Dial-up Dave?
Dial-up Dave.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that you also compared that with Dave takes a long time and beats me really bad in game.
Well, he does, though.
And then Logan takes quick, and I can normally beat him.
There's a correlation there, right? I mean, I do get frustrated sometimes that Dave takes a long turn, and then his long turns usually pay off. He gets 417 points, and I get 161.
But I mean, like, it depends on the game. A lot of dice games don't really have that heavy strategy with it. We started talking about Space Base. Well, it's the same thing with Machikoro. There's not a lot of strategy, especially where it's a dice game, where you can't really plan on people rolling your sixes, what Dave talked about in Space Base. I can hope they roll their sixes, but if they don't, I'm just not going to benefit from that ability.
But you do have those more complex dice rolling games. I mean, I guess I don't know if I would say Roll for the Galaxy is more deep of a game, but there's more strategy of what you're going to roll and how can I change this roll and how can I affect this roll that is going to optimize my turn. And so it's not just roll it and resolve. It's roll it, analyze, try to augment, and then resolve. So you got a game that's like Roll for the Galaxy that is not a similar game. It's a dice game, yeah, but you compare it to a game like Machikoro or Space Base even, where it's just the roll and resolve and you're done. There is complex dice games out there.
Well, then it even goes up grade. Bang the Dice game. Really enjoyed Bang the Dice game. The level of complexity that they added to it, not very much at all. I've now rolled this. Okay, I've rolled this, so I take this many arrows from the center. Now I have this many shots. I have this much beer. I healed myself this much. Now who do I shoot these bullets with? How far can I get them? It's not super complicated. But it's more complicated in my mind for that than Space Base. Okay, I've rolled this. I have this much money. What do I buy? Okay, I buy this.
And you roll, resolve, pass.
One game that we've played a fair bit recently that I have really liked the dice aspect of is Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. I love the dice in that game.
I haven't played that. How does that...
So the dice, you don't have the dice in the beginning of the game. You have to unlock them as you're going through the different years. But when you unlock the dice, there's a separate die for each house of Hogwarts. And the die faces differ. They're similar. The same faces are on all the dice, but there are, for example, on the Slytherin die, there's more dice that do damage. I think it's a Hufflepuff die. There's more faces that heal you.
Ravenclaw, draw more cards.
Correct. And then with Gryffindor, you gain more money. When you play a card that allows you to roll that die, you'll roll the die, and then everybody gains the benefit of whatever you roll. I thought that was a great addition to the game. I can't wait to get those cards and gain the die. And then there's some that just let you roll any die.
I thought that they did great with Harry Potter in general.
They did. It is really a fun game. And we've just finished the base game, and we're ready to start the first expansion. Unfortunately, it's a 4-player game, so
you can't play.
4 of us here.
Amara is much cooler than you and shows up on Fridays.
I get that. Her commute's less.
That is true.
Sometimes you still can't make
And
that
she-
commute, so I understand.
She doesn't have a spouse.
I don't know exactly which one of you, what you were saying a minute ago, but you totally made me think. Maybe you were talking about when they've added dice to a game, didn't have it before. It made me think, gosh, the only thing that would really make Terraforming Mars better that I can think of is just they need to do an expansion where they add dice in some way. Add cards that give you dice that do something awesome. So now
Well, you
you're
can
gonna
get a
have to write-
magic 8-ball that you can shake and say, "Will I have fun?" Outlook not good.
Just to preface that, I think we've mentioned it before, but I like Terraforming Mars normally, but when I play with people that I feel I'm on equal footing with that game, and I've played it with people that just play that game way too much, that they know that game so much better, what cards do, which ones are going to be good for the build that they're going for, and yeah.
And that really makes all the difference in that game, unfortunately. Yeah.
Dave's sitting right here, guys.
So what about Dice Forge? Newer concept of a dice game.
I love it.
I do too. I hope they come out with another expansion. In fact, we just played that this week. Love Dice Forge.
Really, it combines the best of several of the worlds that I love. Dice and deck builders, essentially. It's a dice builder. Combining those things, it's awesome. The only downside to it is the limited number of rounds. Don't always get the opportunity to build the engine the way I want it.
It's interesting. So the game we played last week, I was rolling terribly. I mean, it was probably one of the worst games that I had up till the last 2 turns. And then my die rolls were crazy amazing. I didn't think I was going to get over 80 points, which is has never happened. I've almost always broken 100 in that game, and I ended up with 130-something points. I had upgraded my dice, and that's all I'd been doing, and luck of the die roll, and I kept rolling the few faces that I didn't have upgraded.
Or that weren't good together.
Yeah, exactly. That didn't work well together. It was more than half the game before I even really had anything other than money.
I really, really like that game a lot. In fact, after playing that game, me and Andy and Fritchett, we work on game development a lot. Fritchett has a game that's pretty close to being ready. He doesn't think so. Playing Dice Forge, it opened up a whole new thought process in ways of developing different parts of games. And I was like, oh my heck, we could do that with his game. It got me really excited about a lot of game ideas.
Another one that, Dave, you and I have played a lot online, I'm terrible at, is To Court the King. I wouldn't consider it a deck builder at all, but you roll, and then you're able to collect a roll. And that roll will go in your tableau in front of you, and that will allow you to gain more dice. It might allow you to alter your dice. The goal of this is to gain the influence as you go through the court to get enough dice so that you can to court the king. To court the king, you have to be the player at the end who has rolled the most pips. To do that, you try to have the most dice. Also try to get most of those dice to 6s or 5s. You're going to use those rolls that you've picked up on your previous turn to allow you to re-roll a dice, to change a die to a specific die face.
Some of them are you select any number of dice and you can add 1 to it, or select any number of dice and add 2 to the face of all of them. Some of them are subtract up to 3 pips from one die and add up to 3 to your other dice. So there's a lot of different ways of manipulating those dice in order to get the result that you're looking for.
This is a game that I had. We just didn't play it, so I culled it. And we played online, and I'm like, really wish I would have kept that game.
Yeah, it's a really simple game. It's quick. It's fun. I really like it. As far as luck of the die goes, it is very heavy on that. But it also, if you get enough of the right cards, then you can mitigate a lot of the luck factor. You start with 3 dice. You roll those 3 dice. You have to keep at least one of them and set it aside, and you can roll the other 2. If you like the result on your original roll, you just keep all 3 of them. You're building up as you go, and it's really quick. As long as you have 1 die that you can keep re-rolling. Every time you re-roll, you have to keep an additional die. And as long as you can keep doing that, you can keep rolling as many times as you want. At the end of all of that, once you've rolled your final die and kept all that you're keeping, then you purchase a card. Very, very simple. Had a lot of fun playing that one too. I've only ever played it online, actually. I've never actually played the real game.
That's one I would like to play a copy of instead of online. I'm not a big fan of online games.
I've never seen you play a game online.
I have played that one online a couple of times, and it's fun. I like to see what's going on with everything else.
I agree.
Yeah,
I do like
totally.
that. That is something that you miss when you're playing online.
Getting an actual copy of that, I think I would have a blast with it. And I think I would do better at it, too.
Mhm.
There's some dice games that we've played in the past that are getting expansions that I thoroughly enjoy. I'm thoroughly looking forward to. The Reckoners. I don't know if you've played that one.
Yeah.
I have.
And
Yeah, I have
Played
played
that
that.
SaltCon together.
I love The Reckoners, and they have a new expansion coming out. Hopefully sometime in the next few months. Got off the Kickstarter. More motivation to play that one again.
So, Andy, I got to go back to what you said just a minute ago. You said that you think you would do better playing To Court the King in person. Do digital dice despise you more?
No, because their D6 is still in digital world, so they still hate me. But that's not why I think I would do better.
Because you can see what everybody else is doing. What's
Yeah, I
going
think
on.
I'd be able to understand
keep
what
up with-
everything that's going on
Yeah.
better with an actual physical copy of the game then.
So there's a game that I really, really want to play more. It's a game that I want to love. Quarriors. Quarriors, I want to love that game so much. And I have enjoyed it. Every time I've played it, I've only played it 2 or 3 times. And I've really liked it. But every time I've played it, I don't know, that it's left me wanting for something. And so I'm like, I got to play that again.
It was fun that you were missing.
I don't think that was it. It definitely is a game that I'm like, gosh, I need to play that more. I think it's a game that as I play it more, part of it, like I think maybe Logan was talking about earlier, when you get to know the cards better or the dice better or the abilities and how they work together, I think that will happen with Quarriors. I think it's a really cool game, and I want to play it more.
Along with Quarriors, where you're using those dice are your characters. Andy, I know you have quite a bit of these too, but it's the Marvel Dice Masters game. I think there was a DC version as well. This is a game that I was really wanting to be awesome. I did still enjoy it. Again, it comes down to the fact it's a 2-player game. It's similar where you have the die and you're going to roll the die depending on which face it lands on. If you're rolling a die in a Spider-Man, you have different strengths that Spider-Man can have depending on which face that you roll. Compare that roll result to the character card. I stopped buying it too, as it was a collector game. You're chasing after rares. You'd buy a booster pack and it would come with some dice and some cards, and then it was the cards that were rare. You could have a common Spider-Man, an uncommon Spider-Man, and then a rare Spider-Man. And when you're playing the game, it's more beneficial to have multiple dice. You could get some of those dice as commons, but then if you got the rare card, all Spider-Man's dice were the same. I can't remember if Quarriors are the faces the same. They are. Quarriors, where you could just go to the market and you can buy them. They're all there. I think it's long dead now, isn't it? I can't remember if they've... Because the funny thing is I still see HeroClix.
Yeah, HeroClix are
Still going around. And
That's
I have
a thing still?
Yeah, I have a ton when they first came out. I don't know if they have any value. Throw those out or take them to a thrift store. The old one's probably obsolete now. The Marvel's Dice Master, I like the idea of it. More along your lines, too, with Quarriors, where it was a game that I really, really wanted to like. It just didn't set sail for me because 2 players and it just didn't sing.
You mentioned Quarriors, Dave, and I kind of had the same feeling as you, that I played it several times and I don't know, something missing from it. But there's a game we played, and I can't remember the name of it. Dennis owns it, where...
Dungeon Dice.
Dungeon Dice.
Yeah.
So there's Dungeon Dice, and for me, Dungeon Dice did for me what Quarriors couldn't do or didn't do for me. I loved it. I thought it was great and very well done. And it's all dice.
That's one of the things I was going to say. This episode, we can't not talk about Dungeon Dice, since it is purely dice.
So apparently we're done talking about Dungeon Dice. We mentioned it. Moving on.
No, it is a good one as well. I kind of felt that too, but I'm not ready to admit that, maybe. I don't know exactly. I'm like...
The dice are very similar to how Quarriors' dice are laid out and everything else. Using your dice to battle and everything else. I just think they did it better than anything that I played of Quarriors. Dungeon Dice was better in every way. And more interesting.
We talk about games that kind of didn't shine, but one that I really, really liked, but it got stale really quick because it needed an expansion and it never got one, was Colony. Because I really liked Colony, and Ashley and I have played this one quite a bit, but it just got stale really quick. And I know you still have your copy, Andy. I've culled mine. Obviously, it didn't get enough funding that it could afford an expansion. I think if had it got an expansion, that maybe would have driven more people to get the base game and the expansion. Still a very fun game. And it was fairly quick. I think it was like 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes.
It felt like to me like it was incomplete. It needed an expansion, but I almost think that they just needed more cards in the base game. I think if they would have done that, they would have maybe gotten more funding to do an expansion. There just wasn't a lot of following because it just felt like it was just missing something.
Felt hollow. It was a hollow game.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Several games that we have that we haven't got the chance to play yet. Kubidos is one that uses a lot of dice. The Valor and Villainy minions of Mordak is one that I backed. Really excited to play, but we just haven't gotten to it yet. Island Siege is another one that I've picked up. Alter Quest is one that we were all kind of excited. Mm-hmm. We've only played that once.
We played that one?
You were there.
I know
I don't know. I think you weren't there.
Was I in Ohio that week?
Some of those games that we have that just we haven't gotten the chance to play. So that's kind of our sampling of dice games. We've talked about dice games in the past, but dice games are so relevant in so many games that we're talking about some new ones. So next week we'll be talking about 4 different dice games. The week after that we got another exciting one to play.
Until next time,
we'll see you rolling those dice
at the game table. As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter at Meeple Nation. We also have Instagram
under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Braden Detergent for our music.